My name is Diane Donnelly, and I want to thank you for tuning in to our Facts, Not Fear series, where we aim to give you the right information at the right time so that you can make good, solid decisions and not emotional ones. Enforced lockdowns, isolation from friends and loved ones, loss of job, income, economic stability, daycare, kids' schools closing. Grief and loss on so many levels, from missing milestones such as birthdays and graduations to severe illness and death. There's a constant loop on TV, social media, on radio, about the virus and the bad news associated with it. Today, we're going to be talking with Dawn Morgan, a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist in private practice here in Annapolis, Maryland. She's going to help us to understand what is normal to feel during this crisis and ways to cope with the stress, what signs to look for, and when it's time to seek professional help. Dawn is an AEDP therapist for individuals and couples locally here in Annapolis. Welcome, Dawn. How are you?
I am fine today. Thank you, Diane. It's such a gorgeous day outside.
Oh, no rain today. It's beautiful.
Really appreciating the sunshine. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I've been in practice here in Annapolis for over 35 years. And I see older teenagers and adults, both individually and for couples therapy. So I moved to Annapolis in 2000, and I love the community here. I love the water. I'm a sailor.
Wonderful.
And I also really feel privileged to meet all the wonderful people that I have been able to work with through my practice. So it's really been a good place for me to work. And play.
And play, yes.
Yeah, and play. And play, yes.
So tell us, Dawn, what is AEDP?
Yeah, it's really quite a mouthful, and I appreciate you asking. And I will say that all our AEDPers have trouble explaining this theory to people because it is really complex. But it's called Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy, which is a really big mouthful. And it's a psychotherapy model that was formulated by Diana Fosha in 2000. And our home base is an institute in New York. So the model is growing really exponentially and really is practiced internationally at this point. We have community all over the world. So, and we're growing a little community here in Annapolis as well as the Washington, D.C. area. So it's an attachment-based, emotion-focused model, which is founded on the belief that we all have an inherent ability to heal and grow from past wounds. And we help our clients work through previously unprocessed emotional experiences by accessing deeper feelings they may have buried, right? And so those experiences may have laid the groundwork for kind of maladaptive behavior and current unhappiness. So what we're doing as an AEDP therapist is to work actively to foster safety, to facilitate the process and promote change. So the hallmarks of AEDP are to really focus on the experience in the moment, to highlight and make explicit the importance of the therapy relationship, and to undo aloneness in that regard. We kind of coined that word, aloneness. And so also to emphasize transformance, so change. So I've really been enjoying doing this kind of work. I've been studying for 6 years and got my certification last year. So it's been a long process, but people are very responsive to it.
I imagine, and your aloneness, how appropriate for right now, right?
That's true. Yes.
What kinds of conversations are you having with clients right now? And are they different today than they were 2 months, 6 months, a year ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, in some ways they're different, in some ways they're the same. And so I think we have the backdrop, right, of the pandemic. And sometimes people are shifting their focus to that and how that's impacting them. And then there are other times when we don't talk about the coronavirus at all. We're talking about, you know, the issues that brought people in. So it really varies. But right now, you know, we're 6 to 7 weeks into this pandemic, right? And the dramatic change that it's really created in our lives. I think most of us are adapting. Even though we've had to alter our lives in such a substantial way. So I think each week or so brings something different, and of course can be different for each individual. I'm just going to get some water here.
Sure.
I've been talking all day up to till now.
And you're going to continue, I guess, after with another.
And I'm going to continue after. But so my experience is we've lost our routines. Mm-hmm. And some of us have also lost certain roles for the time being. So I'm thinking about myself, right? So I've lost my routine of driving to the office every day and having that quiet time for myself in the office. And, I miss my more active role as a grandmother because I can no longer babysit my grandchild or touch him physically at this point.
Yeah.
So there are really important things that we've lost, and that can rob us of meaning in our lives, right? And also leave us at a loss for, how to fill that time or also how to address those needs. So I think people are developing new routines, which is really important. Because routines create structure to the day, and they help us when our motivation wanes or our anxiety rises.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've, in my role, I'm a team leader, if you will, and a business owner. And what I have seen and heard from talking to other agents, clients, friends, is just such vast waves of emotion where some days they're on top of the world, and then a couple of days later they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm sad. I don't feel a value. I don't feel energy. I don't feel motivated.
Yeah.
I'm scared about the what ifs. I'm afraid of this life for a year. I'm scared of what am I going to do for my child care? I have to get back to work, yet I don't have child care. My children are sad because they are a senior year and they don't get a graduation and they don't get a prom and they're missing out on all of these different things. So these waves of emotion are so taxing. It just seems they're so tired because of, now Zoom calls take the place of face-to-face appointments and different ways of communication. So they're just so tired. So is it normal and okay to feel this kind of wave and fear and anxiety? And is it acceptable to feel this?
Right. So the short answer to your question is yes, and yes, right? And it is okay. And because it's such a big question that you're asking, I really want to break it down a little bit and talk about emotions and some examples as you've already given reactions to the pandemic, right? I think we're likely to be afraid because we can't feel safe from the threat of illness, right? We don't know exactly who presents a risk to us. They're saying people who are asymptomatic can spread the disease, so we don't know who is at risk, and we don't know how sick we'll become if we get the virus. So that really leaves us with a lot of uncertainty. So there's fear at the base of it. We may feel fearful of what will happen next to our family or our economic situation. We might be angry. because we've lost a job, or we feel that the situation has been mishandled or is being mishandled. We see a lot of evidence of that in the protests that are going on. We may feel sad, or most people feel sad, I think, because we're missing former aspects of our lifestyle on so many different levels. I mean, depending on where this is, landed in your life, you could have missed, a wedding celebration, as happened in my family. It could be the birth of your first baby, and under circumstances that your family can't visit, or there's so many losses, right? On the other hand, I've heard people say, they feel joyful and grateful in the circumstances, all other things aside, because staying at home is giving them time to be with their family that they ordinarily don't have. So there's a gratefulness there. So I think there's really, as you pointed out, a range of feelings, and they're all valid, and we need to normalize them, right?
What do you mean by that, normalize them? How do you do that?
Well, I think, really, accepting the fact that our feelings are just our feelings, and there's no debate about them. They're just undeniable. So I think that, so we don't try to deny our feelings, right? Because if we do, they get buried, and they can cause other social, physical, emotional, spiritual problems. So as you were explaining earlier, the feelings or core emotions, as I refer to them, move through us if we let them, right? And they rise and fall like waves, as you pointed out, right?
Yep.
And they're signals, actually, which are sent from our brain, right? In direct response to phenomena we experience in our environment, right? Whether it's the coronavirus, or, some other physical threat that's occurring, or something positive, right? So emotions really serve to mobilize and guide us to respond to life in a way that's adaptive. So each emotion has an adaptive action tendency connected to it. So, for instance, love, if we experience love, right, we then move towards those experiences in an effort to get more of it. When it's anger, we are inclined to engage in activities that protect or defend us.
Okay.
Or strike out against something. So we need to honor all of our emotions, and make some space for them, for being with them, by naming them, by allowing ourselves to experience them, right? And seeing if our feelings lead to any desire to take some small action, right? It might be reaching out to a friend if we're feeling low. It might, and share how we're feeling. It might be to engage in vigorous exercise if we're feeling anxious or pent up energy. It might be to write down feelings, to use self-soothing activities, right? So kind of getting back to your original specific question, in the pandemic, we need to acknowledge our fear as natural in the circumstance, and find courage to face, daily challenges, right?
Yeah.
So some ways that we can do this, how do we
How do you cope? Like, what are the strategies? Because
right.
What I would imagine is so challenging in your field is when people are experiencing sadness or fear or anger or grief or any of the other host of emotions. And we say, here are the coping mechanisms.
Right.
But what if you don't have the energy to just
Right.
get there, to say, to deal with it? You're just too sad or too withdrawn to deal with it. How do you take that?
Right.
What is your what is your advice to take that first step to get
Right.
to a point where you can start to implement
Right.
or
Right.
employ these different strategies?
Yeah. So I think I want to go back for a second, right? Just to go back to the fear component of it, and then maybe move on to a little bit more of what you're talking about. So I think right now, first of all, just managing fear, right? Um, Taking the precautions that we're being asked to take, following the rules, right? And also, engaging in any safety measures that help us, individually kind of manage that. Staying in the moment, not getting too far ahead of ourselves and predicting the future, because we can't predict the future and we don't have any control. And so when we find ourselves straying, it's like, no, come back here to where you are, because this is unusual circumstance. You really can't predict ahead, and certainly you can't predict ahead negatively.
Mm-hmm.
So letting go of what we can't control, sharing our concerns with others, engaging in activities which calm our nervous system, which we'll talk about. And then I always like to remind myself when I get ahead of myself that I can seek additional resources when I get to a point in time when I've exhausted my own.
Mm.
So, I start, what if this, what if that? Like, wait a minute, we don't know what's going to happen next. And when you are at that point, you know that you have resources, you have people you can call on, you have places to go to get information, help that you can harness that will help you in the moment. So I think that's really helpful. And then for some people who just tend to be worriers anyways, what I've said to them is, if you just can't help but worry at times, just pick a time in the day. Maybe it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and set that aside, time aside, that you're going to just worry about all the things you're worried about.
Mm.
Write it down if you want to, so that you can really be in it and engage in it.
Love that strategy. I love that.
And yeah, and then when that comes up at another point in the day, say, this is not my time to worry. I'm worrying at 10 o'clock in the morning for that 15 minutes. And if I need to jot a note down, like I'm worried about this, explore later, then I can jot that down and then get back.
I love that.
Yeah. So creating a container. Another idea for that is thinking about, okay, visually, can I imagine that I'm putting all of these thoughts in a container, in a virtual container, and then I'm putting that in a file drawer away for right now, because I can't manage all of them.
I love that.
Okay, so I think those things are helpful, for people.
Oh, I think that is absolutely brilliant because, as business owners and in real estate, my field, we time block everything. We say, okay, between 9 and 10, I'm going to make calls for prospects, and between 10 and 11, I'm going to follow up on any leads that I have, and blah, blah, blah. So you're just saying time block to be worried for a few minutes and then move on.
Right.
So you're acknowledging and honoring what you're feeling.
Right.
And then you're going to say, okay, that's appropriate. Now I need to take action because, and I have another question for you that this brings up for me. But what I read a few weeks ago, I was reading a book and it said that sometimes in the midst of this, we don't feel a value. We've lost our value. And it says, remember that your value is you, not what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you're lost in, I'll just put it in my world, I'm lost because real estate changed.
Yes.
And the entire routine of real estate changed overnight. And I could say, oh my gosh, like, am I valuable anymore?
That's right.
I need to disassociate my value to my business with the value of my being.
Yes, I think that's so well said, Diane. So important. So important.
And
as you're saying, we've lost our roles or role shift. And even one of my clients said, my role has been a helper. I'm a caretaker and I'm at home and I'm retired, but that's what I'm doing in my retirement years. And I can't do that right now. And so we begin to lose sight of ourselves is what I think you're saying,
Yeah.
So no, I'm more than my role.
Yeah, I'm more than my role. I'm way more than my role. My role is what I do.
Right.
And my value to the world is X. So I think that one thing that we could take away from, in addition to all these amazing things, I wrote them all down, is to understand your value. Can you articulate? I'm going to ask the audience, can you articulate your value aside from what you do as a career choice?
Yeah.
What is your value?
Yeah.
And you may struggle with that for a little bit, but can't we ask our friends, hey, what do you feel like my value is to help to harness that feeling, right? Don't you think that's helpful or healthy?
I think that's really helpful. Yeah. Yeah. And sharing people how much, they mean to us in this time. I mean, I think that's the other thing that as an ADP therapist that we make explicit all the time is, how much we, value the other person and making explicit really what we see in them, the positive qualities we see in them. And even if they're not reaching goals, the fact that they're striving and that they want to do that. So I think that's really an important thing that you're bringing up.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Don, what you just said is really important because we've set out, most of us in the business world have set out to reach specific goals. And most of us, I would say, are not going to hit those goals this year. So what do? And you revisit these goals and you say, all right, I am not the loss of that goal. I am much more than the loss of that goal, but I'm going to refresh. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to re-strategize. Is fear?
So before you go on, I think what you're speaking to is really deserves to be underlined. And that is that we all need to be compassionate with ourselves at this point. And also we need to be flexible around our standards and the structure that we're creating, right? We're in a time that's unprecedented and constantly changing. And we can't even predict what's happening next week or 2 weeks. So how can we hold ourselves to a rigid standard for performance, right? So we really are going to, it's going to be essential that we have some flexibility with ourselves and treat ourselves with kindness and also other people. Extending that to other people as well, because other people are going through a lot. They're not going to,
Is fear a symptom? I mean, is anger a symptom of fear?
So I think anger is not a symptom of fear. I think maybe what you're asking is, can people become angry as a result of fear that's not being identified?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking.
Anger can be a defense. Any emotion can be a defense in relation to another emotion that you are not comfortable expressing or identifying. Right?
Yeah.
So we're getting really into more ADP work, but our core
I need to hire you, ADP.
Yeah. So our core emotions are, we use something called the triangle of experience. And so it's an inverted triangle, and at the bottom are our core emotions. And ideally, we're going to have these emotions and we're going to process them. They're going to go through us like waves, and we'll work through them. The The problem at times is that people have emotions that they haven't learned to be able to identify and express. And a lot of this is based on how things were handled in our own family of origin. Did we have any experience with that? So if I have anger, say if I have anger, right, as a core emotion, and in my family it wasn't comfortable to, it wasn't allowed to express that, then I'm going to go to the top of the triangle. If I haven't learned anything better than that, I'm going to go up to the top of the triangle and going to become anxious and guilty whenever I feel anger. And that's not a static state. You know, anxiety, guilt is not a place we stay for long. And so we go to the other part of the triangle, which is defense mechanisms. And so that's when we come up with all these intellectual kind of defenses to deal with feeling, or behavioral defenses. Mm-hmm. So it might be, I might deny, I might minimize, I might rationalize, I might blame someone else, or I might overeat, I might overdrink, you know, I might pick at my face, I might, you know, overshop. I may do a lot of things because I don't know how to have this feeling down here. Mm. So like in this situation, as you're saying, you know, maybe there are times people feel afraid of what's going on and they can't express that. Maybe it's not, you know, they've been taught to be stoic and or strong. You can't be weak. So I can't express that fear, and I become anxious or feel guilty, and then I'll go over here and get irritable and angry. Mm. And so what you'll see is, you know, your partner or whomever becoming really grumpy and angry and picking on you. Like, what is that about? Well, maybe that's unprocessed feeling, if there really isn't anything to be angry about.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, when we were talking earlier about let go of what we can't control, and I know when I start getting anxious, I can pinpoint that I'm starting to go into the what ifs. Mm-hmm. Like, what if I can't, like my outlets are traveling and boating. What if I can't travel for the rest of the year? What if I can't go on the boat? Like, these are my outlets. What am I going to do? And the what if this, and what if this goes on
right.
through 2021?
Right.
I can't control any of that narrative, but what I can control is putting it in this little container that you told me to put it in.
Right. The other thing I want to share with you is that, so as you're saying that, you're just listing all these things, you know, I can feel myself kind of tensing up, right? And that's what spins us up, right?
Yeah.
So what I want to tell you is that, you know, there are also things you think about, what can calm our nervous system, because in a crisis, right, our nervous system goes to that fight, flight, freeze response. And people are experiencing both ends of the spectrum, both feeling really amped up, like, oh my God, you know, I've got to do this, this, and this to keep busy. And, you know, I can't slow down because there's too much here to worry about. I have to be on top of it. Or people who are in this freeze response and they're feeling really sluggish, really shutting down, withdrawing, going to bed. So that the two ends of the spectrum, right? So the idea is, you know, how can we bring ourselves back to a calmer, more regulated state that also, you know, has some energy when we find ourselves going off track? So what I'm going to tell you is based on a very complex theory called polyvagal theory, which we're not going to go into now.
Good. I have to research that one first.
Yeah. So, but the basis of this is that we can bring ourselves back to a more regulated but energetic state through movement that is organized. Okay. So it may be, you know, for you and me, maybe it's walking outside while noticing the natural environment, right? For someone else, it might be straightening out their closet. It might be doing a crossword puzzle. It might be standing and singing a song, practicing a piano, hitting a tennis ball, right? But they're all things that require some concentration and have some movement associated with it. It's not sitting on your couch, and staring off into space. That usually doesn't help someone get back into a more energetic and regulated state, or lying in bed. It's doing something that involves motion and that has some organization to it, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is that there are sometimes people can get into an extreme panic state. And this would be, not typical, but certainly happens for people, and, more commonly than we think. But if people really feel frozen, right, because they're so panicky, you can sit and count all the things of a certain color in the room. To kind of bring you back and ground you, right? You can feel your feet on the floor, your, bottom in the seat, your back supported by the back of the chair, all things that get you in touch with your body. You can describe out loud to yourself a favorite vacation scene, right? Something that's real to you is easier to recall and make tangible than something imagined. And you can do like a deep breathing exercise. And there are plenty on the internet. Box breathing is one, but there are plenty of variations of that. But to really practice that, so that you have that in your toolbox, so that when you do get anxious, you can go to that. And I think the key for any of these things, right, is to see, to try it and kind of see, well, how is this working for me? What am I noticing? Is my breathing more regulated? Am I, is my heart rate more regular? Is my body able to move more freely? Is there a greater openness in my chest? Is my neck more relaxed? So the key is to check your own nervous system, because, again, what works for you may not work for me. Right. So it's a trial and error. And it's good to try those things when you're not, highly agitated or anxious. And then once you compile this list, then you can write it down, keep it in your bedside drawer, put it in a little toolbox, put things that you like, whether they're really smooth stones that you would like to just kind of rub and finger when you're upset, or something soft and nubby that you can kind of hold on to, or a song list, or favorite candles, or whatever, that this is my go-to spot, where I can kind of soothe myself.
Okay, that's good. These strategies are absolutely amazing to me. I haven't heard a lot of them before, so thank you. Good. And how do you know the difference between sadness and a state of depression? Yeah,
so obviously so important. So sadness, as we were saying, is a natural emotion that you're going to experience in waves that will pass through you. You might cry, you might feel discouraged, right? But you will get to a point where you experience some relief in the moment, even though you might have another sad moment again later, right? It's going to be this kind of wave-like thing, right? But depression is a state that lasts over a couple of weeks and involves a number of symptoms, right? So people who are depressed have, a depressed mood most of the day. They have markedly diminished pleasure or interest in activities. Sometimes people can lose or gain weight kind of unexpectedly without intention. They can have slower thinking, reduced movement, uh, along with fatigue and lack of energy, feelings of worthlessness, which we were talking a little bit about before, on a surface level, but, on a deeper level, difficulty concentrating. And of course, recurrent thoughts of death, either passive or active thinking about death with, suicidal ideation at times.
Mm-hmm.
So very distinct differences.
Yeah. So the difference in layman's terms for us is it in waves and there's moments of clarity and hope versus
relief.
just
Yeah.
in a constant state of sadness and helplessness, really,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That doesn't, there isn't much relief from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question I have is like social media. So social media can give us false information. There's a lot of comparing in social media. There are people that say, gosh, she is always happy. Nothing's always wrong in her life. I want that life. But what they don't know is she's crumbling behind the computer. She's crumbling.
Right.
There's actually terms for this. I know there's I was reading an article not too long ago about a physical term that escapes me now, but it's a thing because it's so prevalent now.
Yeah.
What is your advice on social media? Stay on it, get off of it, do it in moderation?
Well, I think it's like everything in moderation. And I think what we need to understand when we're experience social media is we can't really verify what's real. It's an image. And so we're interacting with that image. And certainly it gets dangerous. I always say, when people start feeling badly about themselves and comparing, it's like, wait a minute, you're comparing what you know about your insides, right, with someone's outsides.
Yeah.
And so when people get into that comparison, it's the same for social media. Wait a minute, you're comparing what you know intimately about yourself and with someone else and what they're presenting. So I think that's so important.
Right, keep it in check, right?
Yeah. And I think that, I read recently that there was a study at the University of Pennsylvania about digital communication and loneliness. And they found out that undergraduates who cut down their social media activity engagement to about 30 minutes a day saw a significant decline in loneliness and depression after 3 weeks.
That's telling. Isn't that telling?
Really dramatic. Yeah, because they're turning then to real people in real time.
Yes.
Which is much more satisfying. So I think that's important.
I think we as a society, we have a huge problem with being present. We don't know how, we're scared to. I've talked to several friends that say, what's troubling me the most is sitting with emotions that I run from on a regular basis. I can't run from them right now. And it's heavy and deep.
Yes,
and real.
That's right.
Which brings me to my next and close to final question is, many families now are living under one roof for a whole lot more time than normal, than what's typical. And some of that is welcomed and some of it is creating some stress. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's like both experiences are true, right? People are enjoying the extra family time. I mean, I heard that a lot the first 2 weeks, right?
And then the third week came along.
Great. And it's like, oh, this is getting old, right?
Yeah.
And so that's been a good thing. But then I think one of the things that's going on is that there have been a lot of disagreements among family members about how to self-protect at this time. And so it's like there are always ordinary conflicts that occur in a group of people in a family that come when people spend so much time together without external outlets. But now we have something additionally for people to worry about and have really conflicting ideas about, like what is safe and what is not safe, what's too much of a risk and what's what's reasonable. And generationally, people have really different ideas about this. And a lot of my clients in family sessions have raised these issues. So one of the things that I say to people is it's important to have meaningful conversations about this, even if there's one person in charge or parents in charge. But regardless, to have a meaningful conversation about someone's thinking about it. And I say to people, can you try to adopt, right, a posture of calmness, gentleness, curiosity, and respect, right? So especially when it comes to conflict, because that's when we all get triggered, when our conversations start ramping up, they start going fast. If we just slow down and say, wait a minute, I care about this person and I want to treat them with respect. I want to know what they're thinking about, even if I don't agree, because our relationship is really what's most important.
That's really good.
So,
Dawn, that's really, really good.
Yeah, and it's so important at this time, right?
Yeah, I want to circle back to that. Do we have any questions, Angie?
We do. We have one from Facebook. More insomnia during this time. Any suggestions?
Yeah. So it's not surprising, is it, that people would have a hard time really shutting down the evening. I mean, I think there are a lot of good resources on the internet about good sleep hygiene. And so I won't go into them here, but really creating a good sleep routine. If you don't have it, some people do, but if you don't have a good sleep routine, I think, getting that in order, having some regularity to when you go to bed, when you get up. I think the other thing is, having some kind of exercise or movement during the day, and taking some time out of your day to think about the things that might be on your mind, either by taking 20 minutes to journal or talking to a friend about it. Because likely, if this is what's keeping you up, this is not usual for you to have sleep problems, then there are things on your mind that you haven't put aside when you go to bed. That would be
You know what has helped me too is I've always done my gratitudes in the morning and just said, man, I am thankful that I woke up today. I am thankful that I have a house. I am thankful that I have food in my refrigerator that's downstairs and the warmth and the air conditioning, and I can go on. And then I decided I'm going to start doing that at night because I have the same trouble. I can fall asleep, but I can't stay asleep. Right. And so when I've been waking up, now I've been saying, man, I am so thankful for, and then I go through my gratitude list at that time, because what that does for me is it changes and reframes my thinking of, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? To, I am grateful for this. I am grateful that today this happened. I'm grateful for today that this happened. So that's really helped me a lot.
I think that is really helpful. I think one thing I would say about the gratitude list is that I think it's good that if it comes up in a genuine way. I think, and it's balanced with, well, I feel grateful about these things, but I also feel a loss on the other hand. I think there are some people that are trying to feel grateful without really giving some attention to the things that they're really disappointed about and angry about. And that doesn't work, because it's just like putting something on yourself that doesn't fit.
So it's not honoring the other side, right?
You have to do both, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ange, any other questions?
Oh, no further questions.
Okay. This was so helpful, Dawn, to me. This was so enlightening, and I wrote down so many things, so many strategies, and so many things to think about, and be flexible with your standards. For example, adopt a posture of respect, compassion, and curiosity. I think that's brilliant. And I thank you so much for coming on, and I hope to see you in the future.
Okay,
and everybody
good.
else, I appreciate you guys tuning in. And next week we're going to be talking about mortgages and first-time home buyers, so a complete shift from mental health, but something that is very important as well. If you wanted to get a hold of Dawn, here's some information to contact her locally here in Annapolis. And Dawn, we thank you for coming, and audience, thank you for listening in. I hope it was as helpful to you as it was for me, and we will talk again soon.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Diane.
You're very welcome.
Good luck to everyone.
Thank you.